Gemara. Tanu Rabbanon.
Are you going back a little?
Yes. Tanu Rabbanon. Oh, I need to get my pointer. I'm sorry. Tanu Rabbanon. Hamanasech shloishes lugin mayim b'chag b'chutz. So you took 3 lugin of mayim and you poured it b'chutz, not on the mizbech hapnimi hachito and where it belongs. Chayev, you're chayev for being makriv b'chutz. Rabbi Elazar Omer, or Rabbi Elazar Shimon Omer, im molon l'shem chag chayev. That's only if when you poured it into the keli that you were going to use to pour it to get the klesharis, you poured it in l'shem, that these should be the mayim for the Nesachim.
Much when it's geshept.
I'm sorry? It could be even at this geshept.
When it's geshept,
Right, but he had to do it with the klesharis. But it had to be the klesharis because it doesn't. That's right. When the menasich is abenem stam vaser mispritzes and drosen. That's not. It has to be the vaser was a gewein bestimmt of the nesachim for the nischemaim from sikkus. My binayu or the Bach says b'may pligi. What's the machloek with Rabbi Elazar and the Tanakama? Amar Rab Nachman bar Yitzchak v'yesh shir b'mayim chemifu. We got to learn this Rashi inside because it's a very shver Rashi. The yesh shir l'mayim. The Ka'amar Tanakama. The Tanakama says chayiv. He says plain chayiv. Hamanazich shloishish lugin chayiv. Zok Rashi hanocha number 1 that you could ask mehech desi. Well, who adin yoshim shloishish lugin? Why the yesh b'chlal masayimon? So Rashi says when the Chum said 3 lugin, it's lav dafke. Kiddush number 1. Rashi. V'yafal gav the melinu b'chli gadol. Even though you had a much bigger keli than 3 lugin, yet I say 10 lugin, and you filled up 10 lugin, kachinu kli. The keli will be mekadeshit and make it the mayim that's designed to be menatzach on the mizbeach on sukkahs. Why? The ein shir l'meach hag l'mayla. There's no maximum shir. The minimum shir might be 3 loigin. That's why he says shloishes loigin. But there's no maximum shir. So now Rashi is saying another chiddush. Hamanazach shloishes loigin mayim means lavavka. It means a minimum of shloishes loigin, but as much as you want. Right? That doesn't say in the words of the Gemara either. But that's how Rashi is learning. The also Rabbi Elazar lemeimar. Come to Rabbi Elazar to say. Now let's look at the words that he said, and you're going to wonder how in the world did Rashi see in these words how he's touching. Im molon l'shem chag. If you did it l'shem chag, then you're chayiv. So how does Rashi build out these words? V'asar b'lozer l'meimar v'hu shemilon l'shem chag, meaning kederech miluon da'ad nishlosh is looking m'sulay. So v'hu shemilon l'shem chag means only 3. If it was more than 3, it's not kodesh at all. You chap how Rashi sees it? Because I don't. Kidetnan tzloiche shel zov machzek shloishes loigin memali min hashiluach. That's the right way to do it. If you had a tzloiches that was of 10 lugin, 6 lugin, loy kidchinukli, nothing. You don't say it wasn't mekadosh more than 3. It wasn't mekadosh anything at all. Because if it was mekadosh anything at all, then when you poured it, you'd be chayiv. The lechazi lay, because it's not the proper water. The yesh shir lamayim. The enkli sharis mekachin el haroy. So it's much from Rashi that according to Rabbi Elazar, it's a minimum of 3 and a maximum of 3. And according to the Chachamim, it's a minimum of 3 and there's no maximum. And that you see in L'Shem Chag Chayiv. Like I can ask you a very simple question. I could so easily flip the shittas around. Maybe the Rabbanan say, Hamanasach Shlosh Lugin Dafkin, if it's not, he'll be Potter. And Rabbi Elazar says, as long as L'Shem Chag, no matter how much it is, it will be Chayiv. So Mehekadesi B'chlal, the whole thing is Mehekadesi. It's very, very fair. Tosfos asks these kashas and Rashi and has a different shot. Another kasha is Rashi learns that it's a minimum of 3, right? Frek Tosfos, what are you talking about a minimum of 3? Let's look to the top line and number it. Rabbi Elazar ma'afam anasach me'achag b'chag b'chutz chayiv. And the Gemara Beferish said that you can't be learning it out like from Rabbi Kiva Rabbi because we know it from the Nischayayin, because the Nischayayin is Gimel Loigin, and Rabbi Elazar's mechayiv even less than Gimel Loigin because he just says me'achag lav dafka Gimel Loigin. So it's a very, very shver Rashi. The only small teretz I have is for one nechuda is how did Rashi know to say that Rabbi Elazar is the mekel and the Chachamim are the machmir? Right? The Chachamim say you'll be chayiv, but Rabbi Elazar is only if it's that specific amount. So Zok Rashi, that's because we're going to have two other pshatim in this machlokes, and in the two other pshatim, both other pshatim agree that Rebbe Elazar was the mekel. So Rashi wants to be mefarish in that Rebbe Nachman Yitzchak also said Rebbe Elazar was the mekel. But it is a very difficult Rashi. It's a very difficult Rashi. So Tosh brings from Reb Chaim that it's punk for carrot. The Tanakama sover yeshir. The Nakat Shlosh is looking. Lepakas Yoser. Also Rebbe Elazar lememar Avu Shalom Hashem Chag the Kavinu Mana. So Tosh actually learns punk for carrot. But we'll stick to Rashi. I just wanted to be more that it's a very difficult Rashi to understand. Rav Papa Amar. Rav Papa has another pshat. This is such an unbelievable heshbon of different pieces of the puzzle that you put together to get this to work that it's hafaldik. B'kervu nesachim b'midbar pli. There's a big machlokes if they were makriv nesachim. So nesachim are, after you bring a carbon, you accompany it with nesachim. There's a minchas nesachim, and then there's yayin that you spritz on the mizbeach, shlosha shein leparish, there's a loyal. That's on the flour, but also the amount of wine. So there's a machlokes as to when the mitzvah to add nesachim to the carbon started. Did it start in the midbar, meaning the Mishkan, when the Mishkan was up and running, or did it start much later? Did it start when they came into Eretz Yisrael? Now, let's have a look. We're going to learn the Gemara that discusses the psukim of how you know that. So if it's okay with the Olam, I want to learn tonight's Gemara out of order, because instead of figuring out the machlokes of the carbon nesachim midbar in Rashi, and then we'll learn it again in the Gemara. Let's go straight to the Gemara to learn that shaila, and then we'll go back in order. So the first shaila is carbon nesachim. We don't know what has anything to do with how much you need 3 lug and more lug, but we'll get to it. That's just the first and most important piece of the puzzle. And the Gemara makes a big deal about this machlokes, so it's kedai just to learn it. So zog the Gemara, v'hani tanoi the Tanya. So I'm about 8-10 lines down from the top. The Tanya says in the pasuk, kisavoyu. So this is in Parsha Shalach. Chaim's looking it up. It's in Parsha Shalach. The Torah makes an introduction, and let's look at the Torah Or Shalom. So Daber al bnei Yisrael b'mar talayim kisavoyu al eretz mosh v'seichem asher ani noshin lachem. And then the Torah goes on to say that when you bring a carbon, you should also bring the sachem with it. So when is that going to start? When is that mitzvah going to start? Kisavoyu al eretz mosh v'seichem asher ani noshin lachem. What does that mean? That's the big machlokes knowing what this means. Kisavoyu al eretz mosh v'seichem. Zokt the Bryce. The Tanya kisavoyu is lahatina nesachim bebama gedola kosav medaber. Meaning, in the Mishkan, in the Midbar for 40 years, there was no such thing as minchas nesachim. There was no such thing as nesachim. When they got there to Yisrael, the Rebbeinu Shalom said, "Kisavoyu al eretz mosh v'seichem." When you're all settled, you're going to start bringing minchas nesachim. Where on the Bama Gedola, on the Mishkan? The problem is they didn't have any Mishkan at all during the first 14 years. There was 7 years of kibush, 7 years of chiluk, and after those 14 years, they set up Mishkan Shiloi. So what the Torah was telling you is, we're coming into Israel now. For the next 14 years, nothing. In 14 years, you're going to have a new Mishkan. You'll have Mishkan Shiloi, and there you're going to have to bring the Sachem, because up until now there was never a Sachem. Okay. Now, the very first time that Bama Ketana was allowed to be used was when they came into Eretz Yisrael, because they had the Mishkan when they were in the Midbar. When they came into Eretz Yisrael, there was going to be a 14-year gap without anywhere to bring karbanas. So at that point, they were allowed Bamas Ketanas, where they were only able to bring karbanas Yachid, not karbanas Tzibur, right? So maybe what the Torah is telling you, when you come into Eretz Yisrael, you should start giving the Nesachim on your Bama Ketana. Maybe that's what it means. Zok to Gemara, Kishu Omer El Eretz Mosh V'Seichem. Eretz Mosh V'Seichem means the land that you own collectively, the land that you're all in together, which would mean Asher Ani Noiseh Lechem Harei BeBama Hanaheges LeKulchem HaKosav V'Daber. I'm giving this to you as a group gift. That's where I want you to give Nesachim. From the Taich of the Pasuk, it teaches us that the Torah was first being Mechayiv Nesachim, not by the Bama Ketana, by the Bama Gedola in 14 years. Divrei Rabbi Shmuel. No, there was nothing.
They were still fighting.
No. That's Rashi. It wasn't set up yet. And that's what the head of Bamas. Rabbi Kiva says, ich learn on this Taichin Pusik. Immediately when you start coming to explore, you start bringing the Nesachim. That's on Bama Ketana. Akos of V'daber, the Pasuk was talking about a Bama Ketana. Akiva, can I trouble you to mute yourself? Okay. Bama Ketana, Akos of V'daber. Ata oimer lebama Ketana, oy einoi elo lebama gedola. Maybe it's a Bama gedola. Kishu oimer aleis moshvei seichem. The same word that Shmuel was medaik the other way. We're speaking about in every moshav where you had a little bama in your backyard. That's what we're talking about. So you have a machlokes. You have a machlokes tonight between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva. Where there Nesachim in the midbar, right? If you hold that there were Nesachim in the midbar already, then it doesn't make sense that the Torah is telling you that on the Bama Gedola you need the Nesachim. Well, it must be that when the Torah introduces this parsha of Nesachim, the Torah was introducing it for the Bama Ketana. But if you hold that there were no Nesachim in the Midbar, so then it makes sense that the Torah is now introducing the whole concept of Nesachim. So Zok the Gemara, so if you think into this machlokes between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva, it would make sense to say, L'divrei Rabbi Shmuel loy karvu Nesachim b'midbar. So if there were Nesachim in the Midbar, when the Torah introduced Nesachim, when they came into Israel, it can't be talking about the Bama Gedola, because we already had it in the Bama Gedola. So must we tell you that you did Nesachim on the Bama Ketana. But if there were no Nesachim in the Midbar, then it makes sense that the Torah was introducing Nesachim even for the Bama Gedola, which means there was never Nesachim on the Bama Ketana. Now, if there are Nesachim on the Bama Ketana, Zok Rashi, it now leads us to the next step. The halacha is that although you need to be mekadesh, whatever it is you're going to bring in a klei sharis, right? That's the halacha by the Beis Hamikdash, the Mishkan. By a Bama Ketana, there was no such thing as being mekadesh b'klei sharis. You could bring kabbalah, you don't need to be mekadesh anything b'klei sharis. Which means if the Torah is machayev nesachim for a Bama Ketana, it means it doesn't need to be placed in that klei sharis to become kadosh for the Bama Ketana. For the Bama Gedola, you still need it. The nesachim on Sukkot and the wine, the Beis Hamikdash always needed a keli, but the wine by the Bama Ketana didn't. Now, if you remember, we learned the halacha. What is called halal b'chutz? Only something that if you were maktir it on a bama, it would be kosher. Because if you remember, we had a machlokes. What happens if someone was maktir it on mizbeach b'chutz, but it was a rock, it wasn't a mizbeach? So we had a machlokes in our Mishnah. One man holds it has to be a built-up mizbeach, because that's what the bamas were. You can't just be makriv it on a rock. And we brought a raya from the Mizbech that Noach made. And the other one about no, on any rock you could bring it, because Manoach just put it on a rock, right? So if it wouldn't be considered a good akrova, even for the Bama Ketana, then that's not called halal b'chutz. You're only over halal b'chutz if it's something that you could be makriv on the Bama Ketana. So right off the bat, if you hold that they had Nesachim on the Bama Ketana, then even if it was never in a keli, you could be makriv it. That's a chumrah, because if you're makter, even they were never mekadosh or keli. So now you see already how this comes into play with Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, and the Tanna Kama. So it's an easy Rashi now that we know these yisodos. So let's run it through. The kirvan nesachim b'midbar kamivli. V'tervayu islu sada Tanna Kama and Rabbi Lazar holds yesh shir lamayim. So in Rabbi Nachman by Yitzchak Pshat, the machlokes was, is there a shir? So if you're being kaddish with the kli, will the keli work to be mekadosh more than 3 login? According to Rabbi Lazar, it wouldn't, and therefore you'll be potter, unless it's exactly 3 login. And according to the Chum, no matter how much you put in to that keli, it would be kaddish, and therefore you would be chayiv if you were ma'ila b'chutz. Right? That's what Rabbi Nachman says. But now we're saying they both will yeshir l'mayim, meaning if you put in more than 3 login, it wouldn't be kaddish. But that's by wine. I'm sorry, forget it. But that's only in the Beis Hamikdash. But out of the Beis Hamikdash, that's a non-issue, because the kelim has nothing to do with it. So v'chimali tzvei loy kitchinukli. V'Tanna Kama de mechayev. Why did Tanna Kama mechayev? Because he holds loy boy b'nesachim kedushas kli lachayev loy b'chutz. You don't need kedushas kli. You know why? Because suffer he held karvu nesachim be'oil moed shebemidbar kol 4 mishana. Nesachim is an old story. They were doing it in the midbar, in the Mishkan, all 40 years. So when the Torah talks to you now about a new din Nesachim that the Torah is presenting the Eretz Moshe Vayseichem, like the machlokes we just learned. Hilchach bias ha'aretz hamur b'parshas Nesachim b'shlach lecha is lelamdeinu ba shebesheva shel kibus ha'aretz b'sheva shel chiluk ha'aretz. Those first 14 years, kishahayu begilgol v'hutru abamois. That's where Bamas were mutter. When they were in Gilgal, up until Mishkan Shiloi, the Bamas were mutter. Kedintam beperek Basra. So therefore, the Torah is telling you these Bamas Ketanas that I'm now allowing you to use, Te Bama Ketana shall call Yochid to Unan Nesachim. And that's what the pasuk is talking about, which is what we said Rabbi Kiva, that was Rabbi Kiva Shita, right? The Mishum Bama Sibur La Yitrach Lemeimer Bias Haaretz. We don't need the Torah to tell you what you come in there to show you bring Nesachim. You've been bringing Nesachim for the last 40 years. Oh, so that's the first step. Now comes the second step. The chivin the bamas yachid to unin nesachim. Once we've determined that the Torah is telling us that bamas yachid need nesachim, v'hasam klisharis leka. There's never a requirement to put anything into a klisharis when it comes to a bama katana. Kidamar v'perak basra, like we're going to learn soon. B'chutz nami mechayev alayu. You're also chayev b'chutz b'shas iser habamas beloy kiddush kli. B'shas iser habamas you would be mechuyev if you were mala it b'chutz, or if you were menasach it b'chutz, even though there's no kiddush kli. You know why? Hoyel b'shas heter habamas craven beloy kedushas kli. Since b'shas heter habamas the way you would do it without kedushas kli, so if you did it that same way b'shas iser habamas, that is the iser of Allah b'chutz. Kida amar la'il, like we said earlier, b'malon al gabei sela. Remember, that was the machlokes in the Mishnah that I was referring to earlier. Malon gabei sela mishum the hava akrova b'bamas yachid, because by a bamas yachid, just putting it on top of a rock would have been acceptable b'shas heter habamas. Therefore, now that it's asur mechayev Allah b'shas iser, that would be enough to be considered halal b'chutz. Da b'fnim im Allah lo yered. Now, there's another component that you need. So we're using building blocks. So the first problem that we had to overcome was that this would have been a good akrav on the Bama, therefore you're over Allah b'chutz. But there's another tanah you need to have. You need if it's a gans and apostle of carbon, if the animal became a nevela and then you were milet b'chutz, you're not going to be chayiv. And it has to be a psul that occurred after the shechita, like yoytze or a pigel. We discussed these are all psulim that you will say im olu lo yerdu, which is not means not so puzzle. It still has a shaykhus to going on the mizbeach hapnimi. Only that. So now we have to check off that box. So Zok Rashi, even if you didn't put it into a keli b'fnim, you're talking not a good carbon, but you'll say im olu lo yerdu. The b'fnim, if you didn't put it into a keli, im olu lo yered. If you was on the mizbeach, you don't take it down. Kida amar la'il minayin li yoytze. How do you know the psul yoytze im olu lo yered? If you put it up on the mizbech, you don't take it down. Sharei yoytze kasher b'bama. Since yoytze is kasher b'bama, so we actually explained the reason why there's psukim that were telling us which karbonos are Allah yerid and which were Allah yerid. And the Gemara said, how do we know? We have a ribu, we have a miyut. How do we know what to apply the ribu to say it's lo yerid, and what we apply the miyut to say it's yerid? So the Gemara said anything that was kasher b'bama means it's not so possible because kosher b'bama imol lo yered. So since you don't need a klisharis b'bama, therefore b'fnim it would be imol lo yered. That's the litmus test. Rabbi Elazar Savar lo karvin nesachim b'midbar. Rabbi Elazar, there were never nesachim b'midbar. That means anytime there were nesachim, you did need a klisharis. Ubiyas haaretz hamar b'nesachim. It's not referring to immediately. We're referring to 14 years later. La'achar Yerusha v'yeshiva la'achar shekavu mishkan b'shiloi. The whole chiyuv for any nesachim only started 14 years after they got into Yisrael when they opened up Mishkan Shiloi. That's why we needed the Torah to tell us about nesachim by the Bama Gedoyla. Here is where the Torah introduces the entire chiyuv of nesachim. But not during the first 14 years where there was only bebama saktanas. Hilchach, therefore, loy karvu nesachim bebama ktana. Shehisha loy b'klisharis. You don't have any precedent of nesachim being brought not in the klisharis because The precedent does not exist because, like Shlomi said, it never happened, and therefore v'yaskinu b'she'ein mekdoshin b'chutz loy mechayev alayv. And therefore, if you took nesachim that were not mekdoshin in a kleisharis and you were makter it b'chutz, you were menasach b'chutz, you're not chayev because there's no such thing. The man the boy kedushas kli b'nesachim savar loy karbu nesachim b'midbar. It's totally zebezer like we just had at the end of the sugi over here that we learned earlier. So now come to Chais. There's 4 points. There's 4 parts. Part number 1 is whether or not it was karbu nesachim b'midbar, right? Whether or not it was karbu nesachim b'midbar determines if there was nesachim brought on the Bama Ketana. And whether or not nesachim are brought on the Bama Ketana will determine whether or not you can be mechayev for Allah's chutz if it wasn't in a keli. If they brought on the Bama Ketana nesachim, so then you could be mechayev for it if you didn't put it to a keli, right? And you need 2 tanoim for that. A, you need that it would be kosher b'bama, which it is, and B, you need that it would be im alu lo yerdu b'fnim, which it is because we already said they're hinged ebazeh. Anything that would be kosher b'bama automatically b'fnim you say im alu lo yerdu. So those are our 4 points. You put them together, you have a beautiful machlokes. A is if they're nesachim b'midbar. B is if there's nesachim on a Bama Ketana, and C and D is that Sai, if there were Nesachim Bama, Sai itim alu yerdu b'fnim, and Sai would be a good akrava b'chutz.
You call Bama Ketana the Mizbayach that was since given a Mishkan agam tzad.
There was a Mishkan. Okay, so you know better than me.
No, it says.
But there was heter bumps. So it just means there was a shas heter bumps.
So this bishar, you call the Bama Ketana.
So let me ask you, if you're going to, this is what I don't understand.
No, okay.
If there was a mishkan for the first 14 years, so why does Rashi say? So why does Rashi say that the chiyuv of Nesachim would have only started after 14 years? Why couldn't the chiyuv of Nesachim start right away if there was a mishkan?
So for them was the word Bama touched. The private
Yes. That's a book because everything else needs kiddush kli. The mishkan needed kiddush klisharis. Anything that was done in the mishkan needed kiddush klisharis.
Right. So meint daughters gewesen. Dies gemacht der eigene Korb. Da wie gemerkt ja daughters.
I understand, but why do you have to? But once you're learning that, then why? Once you say the pasuk, once you say that there was a mishkan there, so why would you learn that the pasuk is telling you by Bama's Ketana that you can be Nesachim? Learn the pasuk is telling you. But a mishkan you could do it. Okay, well, I don't know the answer. I'll have to accept what you're saying, but it still makes sense in our Gemara. So that's the second shot. So just notice in the second shot, what are we saying? We're saying that it's Rabbi Elazar who holds loy karben nesachim b'midbar. Meaning Rabbi Elazar holds that it has to be in a klisharis. Rabbi Elazar is the mekel, so that explains why Rashi wanted Rabbi Elazar to be mekel in Rabbi Nachman by Yosef shot as well. Now we have a third shot, which is also built upon this shot. All those psukim are not talking about Nisach HaMayim on Sukkot, that's 1 day a year. It was talking about Nisach HaYayim.
That's what Chaim was following the time. 7 days.
I'm sorry, 7 days. Right. Ravina Amar, so let's look at Rashi. Ravina Amar made in Nisach HaMayim. Uduchula alma karvu nesachim b'midbar. Everybody could know that the word nesachim in the midbar, and therefore there was never nesachim brought on a Bama Ketana, and therefore you always need a keli. So if you always need a keli, how could the Chum say you're chayiv if you have more than 3 login? The teretz is the chulam akarv nesachim midbar will be a sara tamer ben nesachim Bama Ketana also the karvu b'bama beloy kiddush kli umiu. So everybody holds that there are karvu b'bama beloy kiddush kli, right? And therefore you don't need a keli. But that's talking about yayin. Umiu b'nisach yayin ashkechan, but b'nisach hamayim lo ashkechan. The chayv is tziburhin. You have to understand, if we're saying that the Chiv Nisach was here for the Bamas Yochid, for the Bama Ketana, you never did Nischei Mayim on the Bama Ketana. The Bama Ketana was a Tzibur on Sukkot. Nesachim, according to the Mandam who holds that Karvan Nesachim B'midbar, Nesachim were brought on the Bama Ketana. So Nischei Yain you would have such a riot too. but the mayim is the chayvus tzibur ein v'loy karvu ela bebamas tzibur b'chlisaris. So therefore, that will be the machlokes of hapligi. Tanakama sover l'meidim nisach hamayim and nisach hayayin l'chay b'chutz, just like nisach hayayin doesn't need a keli to be mechayiv you who had nisach hamayim. I feel like kitchu b'chli. Rabbi Loza sover no ein l'meidim. By nisach hayayin I'm moided to you. But nisach hayayin who do mechayiv b'chutz b'loy kli, because that did apply to a Bama Ketana where no klisharis was required. Abel nisach hamayim kitchu in loy kitchu loy. Beautiful. So we have three pshatim that are really different spin-offs of the same yisodus. Tanu Rabban, hamanasach shloisha lugin yayin b'chutz. So now we're not talking about mayim anymore on sukkos. We're talking about yayin. Chayiv, you are going to be chayiv. Rabbi Lezer b'Shimon Omer, there's a caveat. Who shekitchon b'kli. So what is the machlokes about? So we have different options, and it's all recycling the different svaros that we just discussed. My b'nai, Amar Bada Barava, birutze midos ikebinai. Could be everybody holds that you need to be mekadesh b'kli. Everybody holds that there were no Nesachim in the midbar, and the only time there's Nesachim is only in the Bama G'dayla, never in the Bama Ketana, you need a keli. The question is, we have a keli, we know with surface tension, you can technically fill up a kos with wine, and the level of the wine will be above the level of the keli. Is that little extra considered part of the keli? So you could say that the Chacham, the Tanakama holds, you'll be chayiv, because it's considered in the keli, and it's this kadesh. Only what's below the rim. If it's surface tension that's over the rim, that would not be considered mekudesh b'keli. That's one shot. So but there's other ways to learn. Rava Barei de Rabba Amor. You know what's it about? Kirvu Nesachim bebama ikabenai. Or bemidbar is what the shita changes to. But where did they bring Nesachim in the midbar? That could be the whole shaila, which fits into what we said a moment ago. Meaning, if they had Nesachim in the Mishkan, then that means you don't need Kiddush Kli, because the Tzivui, when they came into Eretz Yisrael, was authorizing Nesachim in the Bama Ketana, right? But if you hold Loy Kerv Nesachim b'Bama, then the only time Nesachim was ever allowed was in a Bama Gedoyla, and therefore you always need Kiddush Kli. Exactly what we said a moment ago. Ubeplugged the Tanoi, the Tanya. This is what we learned. So we'll chaz it over, go very quickly. The Bama does not need Nesachim. That's a Rebbe old. That's the same shaila. When the Torah told Klai Yisrael when they came into Israel that you're going to do Nesachim, was it talking about the Bama Gedoyla or was it talking about the Bama Ketana? The Tanya Kisavoy Latina Nesachim. The Bama Gedoyla Akas of Vidaber. Atoimer Bama Gedoyla Oy Eina Ela Filu Bama Ketana. Kishoimer Alesh Mosh Vezechem. Ashani Noslechem. Harei Bama Naekas to Gulchem Akas of Vidaber. Divi Rabbi. Divi Rabbi Shmuel. Kivoimer Kisavoy Latina Nesachim Bama Ketana Akas of Vidaber. Atoimer Bama Ketana Eina Ela Bama Gedoyla. Kishoimer Alesh Mosh Vezechem. Harei Bama Hanaheges Bechol Moshavos Akas of Vidaber. So now you could extrapolate. Because Leimer, Divi Rabbi Shmuel Loy Karvin Nesachim B'Midbar. Divi Rabbi Kiva. Karvu Nesachim B'Midbar. Shmak. Zok the Heilige Gemara weiter. The Mishnah told us that Rabbi Nechemia taught us that even the Shiorei Adam, you already made the Zrika on the Mizbeach, and now you have Shiorei Adam, which is normally poured out to the Yisoid. If you pour that on the Mizbeach, on a Bama outside, out of the Azara, you will be Chayiv Choros. So Rashi told us off an art, the reason is because of Nechemia hold that the Shiorei Adam is Ma'akiv de Kapara. So since it's an integral part of the Zrika, if you did a Bechutz, you're going to be Chayiv. Now we're going to see where Rashi got that Maskona from. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Tana, we had a Bryce as follows. Tana Rabbi Nechemia, Kedivrei HaOmer, I'm just going to look at the Bach to get the Aleph. Kedivrei HaOmer, Shiorei Hadam Ma'akvi. The Shvich HaShiraim Liyasoid is Ma'akiv de Kapara of the carbon. Meisvei, the Gemara is going to ask a kasha. You, Rabbi Yochanan, is telling us that that's Pshat and Rabbi Nechemia. I'm going to bring you a raya that's not Pshat and Rabbi Nechemia. Rabbi Nechemia Omer Shiorei Adam Shekriven Bechutz is Chayiv. Amalei Rabbi Kiva told him why. V'aloi Shiorei Adam Shiorei Mitzvahim. It's left over for the mitzvah. It's not Ma'akiv. Amar Lei, who said? I'm sorry. Right, that's what we passed it, right? So Amar Loi, so Reb Nechemia said, you're telling me only if it's ma'akiv could it be considered halal b'chutz? I'm going to give you an example of something that klor you're chayav for halal b'chutz, and if you didn't do it, you wouldn't be ma'akiv. What are examples? Evarin abdar yechichu. After you make zrikas dam of a carbon, it's nizratza. If you don't put a single emurim on the mizbeach, it's going to be kosher. Yet, if you put a emurin on the mizbeach achitzain, I'm sorry, if you put a emurin b'chutz out of the azara, you chayav koros. So why should shiyari dam be any different? So Amalei Avarim Abdoin Yechichu Shein Shiyari Mitzvah V'Makriv Mechutz Chayiv. And we got to stop right over here. Why didn't Reb Nechemia say? What do you mean it's not ma'akiv? I held shiyari dam is ma'akiv. If that's what he held, so that's the Gemara's kasha. How could you Rabbi Yochanan say that Reb Nechemia's svar is because shiyari ma'akvin? If that's what he held, why didn't he say that to Rabbi Kiva? So you have a clear raya that Rabbi Yochanan's wrong. Clearly Reb Nechemia holds not ma'akiv. Amar Loi. My reading graph, sorry. So Amar Loi. So how did Rabbi Kiva respond to Rabbi Nechemia? If you're mild in mechutz, you're chayiv koros because I'm a law mechutz. Shehein tchilas avoida. That's the beginning of a new avoida. You're doing a full avoida. It's mistaber. You should get koros for it. Taimer b'shiyari adam shehein tchilas avoida. Shiyari adam isn't the main zrika. The main zrika was done already. These are the tail end. How could you say that over there there'd be a chayiv koros? Zog to Gemara. If Rabbi Yochanan is right that the svara for Rabbi Nechemia is because it's ma'akiv. V'misa lei malei hani nami makve. He should have just said what are you talking about. Shiyar ma'akiv. Tiyofta. So Rabbi Yochanan is Augustlogin. Yochanan is Augustlogin. V'hashtad Omer Rav Ada bar Ava. But now that Rav Ada bar Ava gave us some insight in what Rabbi Nechemia meant, we're going to see it in Iber Kernish. Machloikis b'shirai mapnimiyim. Rabbi Nechemia only says that if you spill out the shirayim of dam, hutla zor yechayev koros, not for many chatos, because for many chatos he holds the tam akiv. We're talking about the shirayim apnimiyim. The loch is the chatois that you spritz the blood on the mizbech apnimi and on the paroiches. Their heavy little detail is makiv, and there, if you don't pour the shirayim on the side, there it will be possible. So that's what he was talking about. So you're right, Rabbi Kiva. The shiyari dam on the chatas achitzoni I'm moided to you. It's only the pnimiyim. Aval b'shirayim achitzonim divrei hakoil loy ma'akfi. And Kikam Reb Nechemia only said that your chayiv course is b'shirayim ha'pnimiyim. And Ketana he and the brisa that has the discussion between Reb Nechemia and Reb Kiva is b'shirayim achitzonim. So you might ask, then why was he challenging Reb Kiva? He should have said, Reb Kiva, I agree with you. The shirayim that are ma'akav ha'itaka hold you that chayiv. He's playing with Rabbi Kiva. He's giving svaras. Why is he doing it? According to me, I agree with you. I'm not arguing with you. But you want to handle with me, I'll handle and learning with you. If you want to assume that it's big Ketana, I can make an argument there as well. Okay, Gavalt. Zok the next Mishnah. Hamoilik es oif bifnim, which is textbook. That's what you're supposed to do. Vehela b'chutz. So you're chayiv for the halah b'chutz. Good, that makes sense. Simple. Molak b'chutz. What if you made malika b'chutz? V'hela b'chutz will be potter. Why? Because malika b'chutz is no good. That's what you're supposed to do b'fnim. We had psukim that says oy yishrat to tell us that by an oif you're only chayiv for shchutei chutz on an oif if you made shchita not malika. That was the chiddush that we know. So there's a cause that tells us that shchutei chutz for a bird it's only by shchita, not malika. Okay, gevaldik. What about a shoichet is a oif b'fnim? You made shchita b'fnim. That's a possible carbon already. That's a molul yerdu. It's mamish possible. The hela b'chutz potter because it's a possible carbon. The halal was on something that could not have possibly been put on the mizbeach. Zok the heilige Mishnah weiter. Shachtu b'chutz, so that would violate a chiyav koros, and then the hela b'chutz chayiv. Why? Rashi says you're chayiv af al halal. There's two chiyuv increases here. Why? Because shchita b'chutz ba'oif Rabbi Yerachmana me'oyash yishchat. The Torah says that doesn't disqualify legabe shchutei chutz, and therefore, even though you shechted it b'chutz, it's still in the game, and it could still be mechuyev for halah. Therefore, v'halah also inami arinon v'aleim toimer our parshas, whatever the first parsha prohibits for shchita, you can continue on and do halah, and you'll be chayiv chorus for that as well. The choshem is chayiv al shchita say b'chutz. If chazer v'helon oyu oyacher, it will be chayiv. Gewaltig. Nimtza. So let's create a little bit of a recap. Derech hechsherei b'fnim. The way you're supposed to do it b'fnim, which is malika, peturei b'chutz, would be potter if you did it b'chutz. Derech hechsherei b'chutz, if you shechted it b'chutz outside, peturei b'fnim. Right. So let me ask you a question. The word derech hechsherei mi b'chutz, is that an accurate clause? It's not derech hechsherei. It's not kosher to shech the bird outside. It just means if you shech the bird outside, it's called shchutei chutz. So shouldn't it say derech chiyuvay mi b'chutz? It should derech chiyuvay mi b'chutz. If you shechted it outside, which would have been nechayv shchutei chutz, would be peturei mi b'fnim. So that's going to be the first Gemara's kasha. V'otav is derech hechsherei. It should say derech chiyuvay.
How you prepare it to be able to do this.
But it's not a good hechsher. If you shech a carbon of oif outside, you're passing it.
Nicht, als der Kusch call. What hechsher mein Zigrad? Hechsher mit mein Zigrad. You prepare to do this thing.
You do the shchita. That's not preparing a carbon.
The only way to team their items to this team is if you're going to do malika, it's not going to be. It's only if you do shchita. Just let's close.
But what are we preparing for?
You're preparing to do that item.
What are they? The halal b'chutz. We're not talking about that. We're talking about derech. If it would say derech hechsher b'chutz, so then me'al b'chutz you're chayiv, that would be geshma. But if derech hechsher b'chutz, p'tur b'fnim. We're not talking about halal here at all. We're talking about shchita.
If you prepare to put some item outside.
What do you mean prepare the body? What the body preparing for? But that's not a hechsher for halal b'chutz. The problem is that's not a hechsher for halal b'chutz. It is, but we're not talking about halal here. We're not talking about halal here. We're not even talking about halal. We're just talking about the shchita b'chutz compared to the shchita b'fnim.
Right. If you're going to shech, if a person shech inside.
Listen, I hear what you're saying, but the Gemara doesn't agree with you. So what am I supposed to do? I hear what you're saying. The Gemara must be. I hear. Okay, very good. Reb Shimon says, and now Reb Shimon is complete Chinese, and we're going to have to rely on the Gemara to explain what Reb Shimon is talking about. But I'll read the words. So if it doesn't make sense, you don't worry. It's not just you. The Gemara had the same problem. Reb Shimon Aimer, kol shechayovin alav b'chutz. Whatever you would be mechayev for b'chutz, chayovin al kayoytze by b'fnim shehela b'chutz. So let's think about it. Kol shechayovin alav b'chutz. If you made shchita b'chutz, right, and you'd be chayev for shchita b'chutz, then chayovin al kayoytze by b'fnim shehela b'chutz. If you made shchita b'fnim, you would be chayev on halal b'chutz. That's not true, right? Chutz min ha-shoichet b'fnim u'mayla b'chutz. Except for shoichet b'fnim u'mayla b'chutz, there you won't be chayiv. There you are chayiv. So the whole thing doesn't make sense. Okay, it's fact the Gemara. Chaim's kasha. Hayach sherei chayuvi. Zog the Gemara, no, tani chayuvi. Shab chayuvi to get on the Gemara. Zog the Gemara. Reb Shimon Aimer. Reb Shimon says, so fact the Gemara, ahecha koi. What exactly is Reb Shimon commenting on that he's making this statement? If you're saying that he's going on the Reisha of our Mishnah, and what does the Reisha of our Mishnah say? Hamoilek oif bifnim, the hela b'chutz, you're going to be chayiv for the halal, right? But molak b'chutz, if you made the malika b'chutz, the hela b'chutz will be potter. That is the comment that the Chacham made, and that's what Reb Shimon is arguing on. Reb Shimon said, no, we have to look at the Kodesh Tziodim over here because it's going to some of them add a lot of information. The bifnim mechayiv just like you're chayiv bifnim, meaning I guess with malika bifnim, b'chutz nami mechayiv, you'd also be mechayiv for a malika b'chutz. If that's what he meant to say, so then hi kol shechayovin alav b'chutz. That's not what it should say. It should say kol shechayovin alav bifnim. Chayovin alav b'chutz miboyle. Now I'm going into the sheet of the Kebetzes. Kol shechayovin b'fnim chayovin alav b'chutz miboyle. So that's not what he could have meant. The Ella, maybe what he said was the opposite. Just like a malika b'chutz would not be mechayiv for Allah, b'fnim nami lo lechayiv. If you made a malika b'fnim, you wouldn't be chayiv afterwards if you made halacha b'chutz. Why, I don't know, but the words don't make sense either. Hi kol she'ein chayovin Allah b'chutz miboyle. So that's what he should have said. Kol she'ein chayovin Allah b'chutz, meaning malika, you'll be mechayiv. So that's definitely not what Reb Shimon is addressing. So let's try something else. Ella Seifa. Let's say Reb Shimon was addressing a different Allah. Hashoichet oif bifnim v'hela b'chutz potter. But shochet b'chutz v'hela b'chutz chayiv, and as Rashi's told us, chayiv shtayim, one for the shchita, one for the Allah. V'yomer Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon said no. Kehechad b'fnim loy mechayiv. Just like you're not mechuyev if you made shchita b'fnim, b'chutz nami loy mechayiv. If you shechted b'chutz, you wouldn't be mechayiv. Again, we would have to need a big explanation why he would hold that, but he didn't say that because hi kol she'ein hayovin olav b'fnim, which is b'shchita, ein hayovin olav b'chutz miboy. That's what he should have said, and that's not what he said. Ella, maybe what he meant to say is ki heichid b'chutz mechayiv, just like shchita b'chutz would be mechayiv him on halah as well. B'fnim nami mechayiv. If he did shchita b'fnim, it would not disqualify, and he would still be able to be mechuyev for halah b'chutz. Zok to Gemara, hakatani. But how did Reb Shimon end his comments? He said chutz min hashoichet b'fnim v'mayla b'chutz, that it would be chayiv. So he couldn't have said that either. So we cannot make heads or tails out of Reb Shimon's comments. So Omar Zeiri, Zok Zeiri, I'll tell you what it's talking about. Shchitas laila bebehema. The discussion is about a case, completely different case, which means, Dr. Rashi, it's a major chisura mechsura, and we're going to have to add a new case in right before Rab Shimon made his comments, and that's what the discussion is about. Don't we love chisura mechsuras? So we're going to have two options of chisura mechsuras that they're discussing a completely different case.
No more malika.
No more oifs. The halacha is if you shech the carbon by night, it's a possible of carbon, right? So v'cheina shoichet b'fnim b'layla, the hela b'chutz, it will be potter. Why? Because that's a possible of carbon. That's the chachamim. Shochat b'chutz b'layla, the hela b'chutz, then it will be chay. Because b'chutz b'layla is it's not mugval, it's still a shchita. So therefore, it doesn't possibly you'd be chayav. Reb Shimon Omer, and that's what Reb Shimon argues on. Kol shechayovin alav b'chutz. If you're chayav for shchitas laila b'chutz, and if you did a shchitas laila b'chutz, you'll also be mechayav for Allah b'chutz. V'chayovin al kayotze by b'fnim. Therefore, if you shechted at night inside the hela b'chutz, and you made Allah outside, there you would be chayav. What is the machlokes talian? We're going to see in just a minute, but then he finishes off by saying chutz min hashoichet oif b'fnim v'hela b'chutz, that avada is going to be chayiv. So what is this machlokes about? Okay. The machlokes is about im olu yerdu or not. So let's have a quick Rashi. Shchitas laila b'behema b'hela b'chutz yikbenayu v'chisur mechsura masnisen b'milta tanakama. The Mishnah is missing the Chachamim's opinion that Reb Shimon responded to. Why is it potter? The eino miskabel b'fnim. They say v'yoyim zivchachem. So that's pashut. If it's not miskabel b'fnim, then it's no longer something that you could be chayiv for Allah b'chutz. And the Allah is vafilu also teireit. If you shechted a carbon at night, it's possible. What if by mistake you put the meat on the mizbeach, you take it off? So we know if it's a malsa teireit, you won't be mechuyev for Allah anymore. Rabbi Yehuda, it's going according to Rabbi Yehuda. The Amar Perakam is Beach, Prat and Nishchut Belayla, it's possible in Gansen. And it's Im Olu Yerdu. Shochat Bechutz Vehel Bechutz is Chayiv. Why? Right? Shlomi asked that question. Why? The Beshchitas Chutz Loishna Laila B'yoyim. Once you're not shechting in the Beis Hamikdash, it doesn't make a difference anymore if it's day or night. The Haroyuhu Lov Oil Pesach Oil Moed L'Machar. Because when you shecht the Bechutz at night, it's called Roy Lov Oil Pesach Oil Moed. You could have done it tomorrow inside. So therefore, Mimonashech, that Shchita would be Mechayiv for Shchita Chutz. Ubalosinami Chayiv, the Ksib Aleim Taimar. Whenever you're chayiv for a shchita, you'd automatically be mechuyev for the halal of that. Okay, gewaltig.
That's the Tanakama.
That's the Tanakama, and Reb Shimon says chayav noch yotz b'fnim v'al b'chutz. Even if you shechted it b'fnim, you're going to be chayiv. Why? Because he holds im olu lo yerdu. V'ashoichet b'ema v'lala b'fnim v'hela b'chutz chayiv ki lo shachta b'chutz. You know why? Because he holds that b'fnim im also lo tered isay. Islay Beper comes Bech Machadish. The clear of Shimon Aimer, Oila, Inlia, the Oila, Ksheira, Minayin, Rabbi, Shadish, Kamdaila, Kamashmal. So there's a Machloikis if it's Olu Yerdu or not, if it was Nishchut Abalayla. So the Achrayim asks, even asked it. So why are they making such a complicated Machloikis? Just make the Machloikis. Tell me a bunch of Machloikis. If you shechted a Karmanet, is it Olu or not? You're figuring out the complicated enough Kamina, and you're presenting it that way. You present it by the lowest common denominator, but a base shaila. That's the whole shaila, if it's a molo yerd or not. So they speak about it. But I just wanted to clarify that is the whole shaila here. The whole shaila is if you shechted a behemoth b'fnim b'layla, is it olu yerd or not? If it's a molo yerdu, then halal b'chutz afterwards will not be chayiv. But if it's a molo yerdu, so it's still in the game, it's still in play. So if you made halal b'chutz, you'd be chayiv. Gewaltig. You know, if you think about how do I explain it simply, and how could I make it as complicated as possible? The Gemara here is making it as complicated as possible.
That's why we have you.
But sometimes he knocks him out. So that was one shot. But we have another shot as well. A similar shot. Rava Amar, Rava says the psul that we're talking about is Kabbalah b'klei chayil ikabinayim. We know the halacha is if you're not makabel the dam of a carbon in a clay sharis, the carbon is puzzle, right? If it falls on the floor and you gather it up, it's puzzle. The dam has to go straight from the neck. We learned straight from the neck into the clay sharis. So here, if you were makabel the dam with the clay choil, it's puzzle. And the shaila is in such a case is it a malul or not? That's the same shaila. This is the Chachamim talking. Hamakabel b'chol b'fnim v'hela b'chutz potter. But Hamakabel b'chol b'chutz v'hela b'chutz chayiv. Because once again, it's still a royu. So let's have a look at the Rashi on this. V'chein hamakabel b'chol b'fnim v'hela b'chutz potter. Zok Rashi da b'fnim im olo yered the havoloi kenishbach dam. Rabbi Yehuda the last lay im olo lo yerdu. But Shimon's going to hold im alu lo yerdu. Shimon Aimer the b'fnim nami isle im also lo tered. V'afilu nishbach dama the Ketana Yosy mitzim alu lo yered. So that's the same shaila. Basically, we just picked two examples where there's a machloikus of im alu yerdu or not, and that's where the machloikus is between Reb Shimon and the Tanakam. Gewaltig. Zog to Gemara weiter. What's the sfor for that? I guess because it's royal love lefnim. I guess. Reb Shimon Omer kol shechayovin alav b'chutz chayovin al kayoytze b'fnim v'hela b'chutz chutz v'nasheich doy b'fnim v'hela b'chutz. Now we had two pshatim, but now we're going to bring the game changer. That's mevatel everything. The reason why we couldn't come up with a pshat is because we held that if you make malika b'chutz, the whole thing is gone, and there's no more chiyah for Allah b'chutz once you made the malika b'chutz, because it's like you choked the animal to death. You didn't even slaughter it, right? That's how we named it until now, because that would have been the easiest way to explain Reb Shimon.
Yeah, but Reb Shimon now even holds that a shirket b'chut b'fnim is chayiv. A shirket oif b'fnim.
No, he doesn't have Shayach Leif Chayiv. What do you say?
You just said that. Kol shechayav alav. You just learned it.
Kol shechayavna alav b'chutz, chayavna kol yoytze b'fnim, chutz min ha'oif, shoyched oif b'fnim, v'helu b'chutz, that would be potter, yeah.
Okay.
So now we have a game changer. V'hashda the Tani, avud the Shmuel, bar of Yitzchak, the following machloikis, hamoilik oif b'fnim, v'helu b'chutz chayiv. That's potter, that's not a chiddush. But molak b'chutz, v'helu b'chutz is potter. That's a Tanakama. But Reb Shimon argued on that. Reb Shimon mechayiv. So you could say Reb Shimon Hasam Koi, that's what Reb Shimon is talking about, and we have to change what he said. V'toni kol shechayav and alav b'fnim v'hela b'chutz chayav and alav b'chutz. So now it's a game changer because now we could change the whole halacha. We could change what the Mishnah said, and then everyone's happy. Gewaltig, geschmack. So because if you look at the Mishnah, Reb Shimon said kol shechayav and alav b'chutz chayav and alav b'fnim. Now we're thinking it's exactly the opposite. Kol shechayav and alav b'fnim chayav and alav b'chutz. But if you twist that around, then everything is simple and easy. What an easy Gemara. Zog the Gemara weiter. Chatos.
Rav Machloik is not.
Yeah,
We should start with this, and we'd have a very short doc.
that's right. Zog the Mishnah.
That's what you love?
Nope.
Chatos shekibel dama b'kois echad. So you were makabel all of the dam in one kois klisharis. Everything is done by the bull. And then you took the dam and you went out of the azara, and it became possible b'yotzei and nasa b'chutz, and you were makir, you were zorik to them outside. Bang! There's a chiv chorus right there. Then the chazer v'nasa b'fnim. He took that dam that's possible al yotzei, and he brought it b'fnim, and he spritzed. Okay. Now the halacha is there. You would say im ololo yerdu. It's yotzei, but it's definitely not a kosher or carbon. But you're definitely chayiv for the zrika sadam b'chutz, right?
You're not higher for the nichnas? The tummy down into
Who said anything about tummy?
You said it was tummy.
I didn't say tummy.
Oh,
So it's yotzei.
okay.
Okay. How about b'fnim? First, you made the proper zrika, so now the carbon is gone and taken care of. The chazav and nasa b'chutz, chayiv will be chayiv. Why? Shekuloi royu b'fnim. So let's understand that. So let's see Rashi. Nasa b'chutz, b'chazav nasa b'fnim chayiv. Kedinas. That's not a chiddush. Ela mishum seifa the boy misni b'fnim v'chazav nasa b'chutz v'ashminan the avagav the shirayim ninu mechayiv elayu. Who's that? Who else is shirayim you're chayiv for? V'stamak Reb Nechemya. It must be speaking about chatois hapnimius. Okay, beautiful. Next. Kival dama b'shtei kaises. What if they were makabel to them in two kaises? Nasan shneim b'fnim, and you spritz them both b'fnim, potter. I mean, again, that's kedinasva, that's posh, that's a textbook case. But shneim b'chutz, then you'll be chayiv, and you'll be chayiv, I believe, for both. Rashi says you'll be chayiv for both, provided that the mhoishalo yediyah ben tayim chayiv shtayim. If he did it b'shoigig and then he chapped and did it again b'shoigig, so then he's chayiv two chatois because ushnei alomos. Okay, what about echad b'fnim ve'echad b'chutz? If he was echad b'fnim ve'echad b'chutz, the halacha is, you see it says potter here, but if you look at the ches, it says chayiv. Isn't that geschmack? So any way you like it, you can have it.
I don't have a ches.
You don't have a ches over the word potter?
No.
Because you don't have options. We have options. Echad b'fnim ve'echad b'chutz, it's potter. Let's see what Rashi says. Echad b'fnim ve'echad b'chutz, potter. So he agrees with yours.
Not the whole thing.
Even according to Reb Nechemya, why? The Gemara is going to explain the kasavar kois echad oisas chaveri dachi. Once you spritz a little bit, even if you didn't finish all the matanos, but once you're using one kois, it makes the other one dachi, pushes it away. We actually had this sugi already. It's not even shiraim anymore. It's called dam datutcha. Shiraim is you spritzed with this dam, and now the rest is shiraim. But if you were matcha the whole kois, if you matcha the whole kois, that's not even in the parsha. Okay, so that's why you don't potter. What about echad b'chutz? First you spritz b'chutz and then echad b'fnim. Well then chayv al achitzoin because you made this rika, but the dam that never went out is kosher. So v'apnimi mechaper. It would be no different than if half the dam spilled out, but half the dam you have, you could still be mechaper. So here you have a kosher or carbon and you're chayiv for shchut echutz simultaneously. Zokt Gemara, Lama. I wonder if he could use that chatos for this
Yeah.
Avera. And you could,
It's the end of Shabbos.
well, could a guy bring a Chattas, do the Avera b'shoigig, and then this is probably not. Lamad Davar Daima. And Rashi says, what do you need a Lamad Davar Daima for? What's not clear about this? I think everything is crystal clear. So I think the Gemara explains. Lamad Davar Daima. Lamavrish Chatasoi, Va'avda. V'hivrish Acheres Tachta. The Achach Nimtas Harishoyna Varishain Oimdois. So what's halacha? One of them you're going to select the Shech Namir Korban Chatas, and the other one is Chatois HaMesos. You just let it die. That's what you're supposed to do. But what happens if Shachat Shteim B'fnim? He's potter. Of course he's potter. He didn't do anything wrong. I mean, yeah, he did something wrong. He shechted this animal that was supposed to be Mesos, but there's no Isser Karish, there's no Halal B'chutz. Shteim B'chutz. What if he shechted them both outside? He'll be Chayiv, because one of them is the Korban Chatas. What about Achas B'fnim, the Achas B'chutz? Then he'll be potter. You know why? Because the moment he shechted the one B'fnim, the one B'chutz was a Chatois HaMesos, right? Chatois HaMesos that you shecht B'chutz, you're not Chayiv, right? But that's only if you did the Zrikas
How
Adam.
do you know which one? He didn't go which one. Why?
As soon as
Either one could be either one. Either one of these two Kabbalas could be based on or could be the one.
One that was lost.
No. You can pick either one. It's up to you. Yeah, you can pick either one. So Achas B'Nim, Achas B'chutz. Right here it says Potter, but again the Shita changes it again. So let's have a look at Rashi. He holds Potter. Achas B'Fnim Vashtei B'chutz Potter. The Havel Chato Shekibur Balel. So the second animal, wasn't a carbon anymore. It wasn't a carbon anymore. Gewaltig. I think this Lamad Avram is more complicated than the Beis Halacha, right? Okay. Weiter. Achas b'chutz v'achas b'fnim. So first you shechted one b'chutz and then one b'fnim. Chayv al chitzoyna, because when you were makravit b'chutz, it could have been a chatos. So therefore, it was royal of Fnim, therefore you chayv. V'apnim is mechaberes, and the one you shech levi is a perfectly good carbon. Now, kishem sha'adam poiter es besara, just like the dam of a carbon chatos is matter its basar, and now there's no more me'ila on its basar. Kachi poiteres es basar chavata. So too, the other one, which is a chatois hamesos, once you spritz the dam of the first chatos, that officially makes the other animal chatois hamesos. Once it becomes a chatois hamesos, you're no longer moil in it. So a carbon chatos, until you spritz the dam, the meat you'll be moil if you have enough. So therefore, once you spritz the dam, you're not moil in the meat of the chatos. But in this case, where there's two animals involved, when you spritz the dam of chatos A, then that automatically made chatos B into chatois hamesos. So now you're not moil in that anymore either, because it became ois carbon. Gewaltig. So Baruch Hashem, we were zoicha to finish Daf Kuf Yud Aleph, and we did it in less than an hour. Baruch Hashem, we were zoicha to more and more Blata Gemara. We're closing in on the end of Kochim, on the end of Zevachim.
Amen.
I'm going to share a beautiful